everybody, so I had so much great feedback from the last REONOMY video. I figured I'd do another one. I wanted to be able to show you just how to pull a lead list for any asset class type, exactly how I would be pulling the lead list to make sure you have the highest quality lead list that you can when it comes to prospecting commercial real estate. As you can see, this is the REONOMY dashboard. Everyone, you're always just going to click the advanced search function. I'm going to start with multifamily properties. I'm going to give you some guidance about every size multifamily possible, and we'll take it from there. So let's just do Florida. Let's make this really fun. I'm down in Miami. We are going to start off with some multifamily. So one thing you're going to do is that, yes, you can click it here, but I want to show you the more filters options. If you go to multifamily, you're going to see a lot of different options. If you click multifamily, you're also going to get some co-ops. You're going to get some two-family duplexes. You see 75,000 duplexes that are marked in REONOMY. It's insanity. You know, you got a total of 221,000 properties. Obviously, we're probably not going to want to call co-ops. That just doesn't make any sense. We're not going to want to call rooming houses. Obviously, 2 families, 3 families, 4 families are not commercial properties. Now, don't get me wrong. Have I made a lot of money by brokering and wholesaling and also buying 2 families, 3 families, and 4 families? Yes, of course. So if you want to prospect them, no problem. Nursing homes. I have not had a lot of success on the nursing home front. We've pulled some of the lead lists. I don't know if it's exact. You know, REONOMY is not a perfect software. I like to use softwares for what they're really good at. So let's get also with the frat and sorority houses. Let's take that out for a moment. Now you're left with 2 things. Now, obviously, you can, for multifamily, we'll talk about large, small, and all that kind of stuff when it comes to multifamily. For a moment, I just want to talk about mobile home parks. I think mobile home parks are a very underutilized asset class, or a very under prospected asset class, very lucrative, huge opportunities when it comes to mobile home parks. The one thing I want to stress here is that this is all different sizes. Same thing with the general multifamily. I mean, like sometimes you even get 2 families, 3 families, 4 families in the multifamily general option. So if you're calling mobile home parks, I'm going to do one then the other real quick, but if you call mobile home parks, this could be a 3-pad park, 6-pad park, right? It could be a very small mobile home park deal that's going to be involved in this. So you have to adjust some things, just like in the multifamily world, in this 97,000, almost 98,000 building list, there's a lot of other things you're going to have to mark here when it comes to pulling multifamilies. Now, again, this is just the state of Florida, so if you want to call nationally, you can do that as well, but I want to give you some pointers. I'm just going to go straight down the list here of a bunch of other different things that you can click on. So let's go to building and lot. I want to be very clear that when you're doing multifamily specifically, a couple of the key things that I want to focus on is do not play around with the total units. For whatever reason, REONOMY does a pretty poor job when it comes to actually getting the amount of units correct. I'm just telling you, I've made a lot of mistakes already when it comes to REONOMY. Do not use the total units. It's probably not going to be good. Same thing with the building area. Building area is like the square footage of the property, which we're going to get to in the retail, in the industrial part of this video. But I want to be very clear, there's just absolutely no reason to play around with the building area, especially when you're doing multifamily. Just like, oh, well, I'm looking for 10,000 to 30,000 square foot multifamilies. First off, no one really talks like that. Most people talk about unit counts. They're like, oh, I want to call 20 to 50 unit multifamilies. Well, here's the problem. As you can see down here, there's a 3 unit. This is just a 2 unit. 3s, 5s, obviously, a 5 is fine, but a 1 unit multifamily, that's not accurate. A 1 unit multifamily property that sold in August of 2023 for $48 million? I think not. You're sort of seeing my point where it's just not exact. So I'm going to try to show you some things that I use to filter out some of the not so great criteria. So let's get back to that. Don't play around with units. I don't also use the lot square footage. I like to use that. The year built, I think, is actually fairly reasonably accurate for the most part. However, I'm still going to skip it most of the time, okay? Because I'm going to tell you, it's like one of the last things I'll go to if the list is still too large. I don't really use any of this. For the most part, I really don't use any of this. When it goes to owner, there's a few things on here that I want to mention. I want you to realize that company and person, REONOMY, again, doesn't do a spectacular job, when it comes to really differentiating these two, because company is like Blackstone. So, hopefully Blackstone gets removed, but sometimes larger companies are still not removed when you click person. I don't really play around with this part too often, but I will always 100% of the time, obviously click includes a phone number. So what the heck, what would be the purpose of prospecting or pulling a lead list of properties that don't have a phone number? It just doesn't make any sense to me. Owner occupied properties. Again, I don't think this is actually, that accurate, to be honest with you, but this is also something like for larger, retail or industrial properties, you can probably play around with this. I've had some success, maybe 50 or 60% of the time it's been accurate, 40% of the time it's not so accurate, but just on the multifamily side, I don't play around with that clearly. Properties in portfolio, you can actually play around with a little bit. You can do maximum properties in portfolio of 3 as an example. poll, which basically just means I want to take out the people who have 8 properties, 15 properties, 30 properties. Because when they own a ton of properties, the odds of them selling one of them, for a affordable price or for a very lucrative price is probably going to be slim to none, because they're pretty savvy investors, because they do this for a living. I'm looking for people who don't do real estate for a living. I'm looking for people who, mom and pop owners who would like to sell properties where we can find great deals. So you can do that, play around with 2, 3, 5, you can keep it under 5. I've had some decent success there. So let's just keep it at, we'll keep it at 3 for now. Portfolio assessed value. I think the assessed values are always super skewed. Like, you have people who have like 30 properties, the assessed value is like $3 million. It's like, it's just not accurate sometimes. I don't really ever play around with the assessed value. It's just not something I would like to use. When you go to occupants, I don't use any of this. I've never really used any of this. I don't play around with this too much. If any one of you has had success with using the occupant for any reason, please let me know. But this is more so of like, I'm looking for a specific tenant type or a specific owner. I don't see the purpose of using this. I use a lot of these things. I'm going to explain to you a few things. So number 1, sale date, not within. I typically will do, I not played around with all these for the most part recently because of how many properties we've been prospecting. And obviously, like last year, we did several 100,000 phone calls across my team. It's very hard to do that when you're only doing not sold within the last 10 years. So I try to do now the last 2 years, not sold within the last 2 years, which means they could have bought it during COVID, 2021. Can't believe we're in 2024. So I guess that would include parts of 2022 already, which is wild to even think about. My point is, if you're just starting to prospect, I'd probably do not within the last 10 years. However, as you start to prospect more and more lists, you're probably going to have to start doing not within the last 2 years, because you're going to need a lot more properties. Because if you click not within the last 2 years, you're going to get 51,500. But if you do not within the last 10 years, you're now dropping to 50% of that number. Now you're down to 25,500. So let's just say I'm going to pull a lead list for the first time. I'm going to keep it with not within the last 10 years. The other things to play around with is the sale price, the most recent sale price. Again, for whatever reason, REONOMY doesn't always have the most recent sales price. Sometimes it's just not disclosed. If that is the case, I want you to know we have 25,500. If I move this down to, I want to prospect properties that have sold between, let's say, $1 million and $10 million. I went from 25,500 properties to 1,200. That's crazy. What I have found is that there's also a lot of properties that were not marked. I mean, as you can see, look at this. This is ridiculous. 2,000 properties were sold between $0 and $1,000. I mean, obviously that means they were just trading between LLCs, changed it into a trust, and all that kind of little stuff. Same kind of thing here. Like, these properties were clearly not marked appropriately. They were sold 2,673 properties sold between $1,000 and $50,000. That's just not accurate. Now, again, this was 10 years ago, so you want to keep that in mind. So maybe we'll go down to $500,000, right? So now we got 2,368. I like where we're at now. I've seen a lot of people ask me questions of like the likelihood to sell stuff. Look, if you want to try it, try it. I have not had unbelievable success with this. I don't think it's like this magic thing where all of a sudden you're going to find out that all these properties are likely to sell. However, I do think it's something important to look at. I definitely think that if you've never done this before, it could be a good option for you. I'm still not quite sure, because it's like, oh, we have like all these different things, all this different criteria that's, giving us, it's this algorithm that's giving us this idea that they might be likely to sell. I want to mention a few other things. The price per square foot, we will use this in the future. I do not use this for multifamily properties. I just want to be clear. Let's move on to the next piece, which is debt. With debt, it's very interesting. Now, hold on. There's a lot of people, a lot of fear going on. There's a lot of news going on out there in the world saying there's a lot of debt coming due. A lot of loans are maturing. This is something you might want to be paying attention to. I just want to be very clear with you that, listen, you can definitely do maturity date, and you can play around with this kind of stuff. Like, obviously, like, if you have REONOMY, you're gonna be able to pull, 1,000 plus properties every single month, depending on how, what your account looks like. Let's just say you do maturity date within the next 12 months. You're not into 56 properties. You know how fast you can call 56 properties? However, these might be fairly lucrative properties. The point is, you can play around with this, but you only have 47 properties. So it's like, okay, you're going to call 47 properties. What, you might get 4 people on the phone, maybe 10 or 20% of the people on the phone, 4 to 10 people on the phone. It's like, that's probably, it's great for one day, right? I mean, you're going to call through 47 numbers on the Mojo dialer that we use. You're going to probably do that in a matter of what, an hour? So just keep in mind that, like, look, I do believe in this type of setup, but it's just not enough to keep you super busy. So you can pull a bunch of these 47 property lists and call a bunch of those lists over time, a bunch of different asset classes, and you can probably have some decent success. I just want you to be clear that like I probably wouldn't do this right away. You can play around with this. I think there's actually some decent opportunities here. I do not believe the mortgage amount is actually as accurate as it says. I would not play around with this so much, but you can definitely play around with the maturity date and the mortgage originations. Same thing with distress. I want to be super freaking clear about something. Auction dates. There is nothing you can do about properties that are in auction. They're already owned by the property, the bank, right? They're already owned by the bank. You're just not going to be able to do much. I really wouldn't mess around with this at all. I think this is a complete waste. Pre-foreclosure, which basically just means they missed a payment, at least one payment. They missed a payment. Now, again, you can look at final judgment of foreclosure, list pendants, notice of default. These are all, different stages of foreclosure. And you can play around with these. Listen, have I played around with them? Yes. Have I had any, unbelievable success that I think is going to be absolutely life-changing that I would tell you, hey, this is, the magic sauce? No, I have not. And now if you want to play around with it, you can. Like, let's say you have the 2400. How many of them are Liz pendants? None. Okay. Final judgment of foreclosure? None. Okay, cool. Notice of default? None. Okay, cool. As you can see, it's not really going to change much. Same thing with the CMBS watch list, which, as you can read here, this is saying there is potential problems ranging from minor failed inspections to departures of major occupants or debt. This is obviously saying some services issues, service coverage ratios are falling below specific measured benchmarks. Can you do, currently on the CMBS watch list, you have 18 properties here. Again, the same thing as we just talked about when it came to the debt maturing. Sure. Play around with it. I've done this. Do I think it's like unbelievable? And it just all of a sudden, these people have to sell. They want to sell. They're super motivated every single time, 100% of the time? No. Should you try it? Sure, absolutely. You should definitely try your own custom list. 18 properties. How fast you're gonna get through 18 properties? Probably like 20 freaking minutes in Mojo. Finally, tax amount. This is something that I do play around with all the time. I do talk about the taxes when I do pull lead lists. So year over year change. This is in the tax amount. How much the real estate taxes have gone up. I don't touch that. What I do play around with is the tax amount. How much is the real estate taxes currently? If you look at this right now, Florida, obviously the real estate taxes aren't crazy high in comparison to New Jersey, but what I will play around with is something like, I want to do a minimum of something like $15,000. The reason why I do this is because I don't want to call little tiny baby properties, and most of the time, this will eliminate it. I've been doing 15,000 most times. However, I will go up as high as 50 or even 100,000, depending on the size of the property you want to prospect. So obviously, more you know your area, like I know Jersey very, very well. I know the tax amounts very, very well. So depending on the type of, the price range of a deal that I'm looking for, I'll play around with the taxes. If you think about it here, I'll play around with maybe 15. Let's say that we want to prospect really high price properties or higher price properties. Let me edit this real quick. Clicking the wrong thing. There we go, Mr. Arrow. Maybe do 25. Let's even just say 30,000. So we'll do 30,000 and above. So we'll play with that. I got 1,122 properties. Let me click apply. Let's see what we got. I'm getting excited. I mean, like, here's some decent stuff here. Now, you're going to get everything because we didn't sort by units. We have 131. This one doesn't even have a unit count, like I had mentioned. 6, 22, 223, 226, 117, 312, 2. I mean, this property apparently has $30,000 in taxes, but it's only a 2-family. I mean, it's just wild to me. Now, as you can see, a lot of them actually have the unit counts here. There you go. Hi. This one actually made 2,466 units. They paid $1 million. I mean, again, this is why I try to say sometimes it's just not absolutely accurate. So I just want to keep that in mind for you guys. A lot of these, some of these sold for, 100 units sold for 565, 24 units sold for 500 grand. Again, I don't know how accurate that is. I'm not going to speak, I'm not going to talk too much on that, but here you go. Look, 106 units sold for 950,000. This is what I'm trying to tell you. It's not always accurate when it comes to the unit count. I just want you to be cognizant of it. The one thing you can do though, this could help you out with your metrics, is that if you go to building and lot and you go to total units, you can do minimum of like 6. Say minimum of 6 units, you eliminate a lot of stuff. Same thing if you do hypothetically say minimum of 20. Now, again, you're still assuming right now you're down to 700 properties. So that's actually pretty good that they've actually marked a number of these. But as you can see, if you go down to 6, we went from, what do we have before? 1,100 and something. We lost like 150 properties or something like that just by going to 6, which I'm not saying that those all 150 properties are under 6 units. It's just saying that they are not marked as larger than 6 units. So again, if you want to start with 6, maybe again, like we talked about, you can go to 20 and now your lead list is down to 700. This is a pretty comfortable list. Let me hit apply. Last thing you're going to do is this. I would really, really, really recommend when you're going any asset class. Now, again, this is just multifamily, but this applies to any asset class. I would call specifically a couple specific counties. Okay, don't call the entire state of Florida. Maybe for your first lead list you can, but as you get more and more dialed in, call a couple specific counties. So I'll give you an example. In New Jersey, there's like 10 counties that we really have dialed in. Like we have a ton of buyers for every asset class we prospect for, every price range, every type of property we come across, we can sell it in about 10 different counties. Outside of those 10 counties, and I think there's like 20 some odd counties in New Jersey, I always forget, like 26, I think, or 21 counties in New Jersey. Most of them are just way, like, super South Jersey, super North Jersey. Like, unless you're from those local markets, you're probably not going to be the one to buy there. I like to say, like, again, if you're Florida or if you're any state, choose 5 or 10 different main specific counties. You can start with 3 if you wanted to, or even 1. Let's say we did Dade, right? Miami-Dade County. If I can apply in Miami-Dade County, a lot of these properties, a lot of them, okay, if you look at some of these, the price ranges on a 223 unit, I mean, like downtown Brickell, as an example, super expensive product. I mean, downtown South Beach, super expensive product. Just so much super expensive product where, like, if you're calling Class A product in downtown Brickell, you're talking several $100,000 per unit on a possible sales price. It's just a very different type of sale. I'm going to try to click on one of these just to kind of give you some reference. This is why I think it's important to go by, counties in a specific way. This one here might be a decent option here. But again, this person has $21 million, which is probably not accurate. It's probably way more in assessed value. I mean, as you see, the assessed value is totally off. But this property here, again, it's saying it's 21 units. It's probably not a good example, but I want to show you that there are, if you go back to the property list, I'm trying to find like a very large multifamily. The point is, if you're looking at like a 200 unit deal in this market, which I think here you go, 245 units. Let's just click on this one real fast. 245 units. Okay, so that's the most recent sale of $3.5 million. So they probably bought the dirt and then they developed it since 2000. This is just my assumption based on the current situation. Even though it says built in 1973, I don't think that's accurate. But point of being here is that this property's worth tens of millions of dollars, and the odds of us getting in touch with the a mom and pop owner, which this person might actually be, Riverview Miami Review Apartments. I'm not going to scroll down and give their contact information away, but you could look at here. It says they only have one property. This actually might be a decent option, but they're saying that they're evaluating this property. Look at this, at $21 million. So you just need to be prepared going into this. This is $500,000 a year in taxes. Just know what you're getting yourself into. You need to be able to speak intelligently when you're trying to talk to these types of people. Just being a random first-year broker trying to call somebody who has a $30 million property and you don't have the right questions, which, by the way, if you're wondering what questions to ask, make sure you go in the description down below and download my script book for free. Okay, it gives you literally every question that I would ask. So just be cognizant, this is in that lead list. There's a bunch of also really, really good stuff in here, right? Where, 20 units, 40 units, 60 units, 80 units, 90 units, 126 units, a lot of good stuff in here. So just be mindful that you need to, because it will blend into the next steps, which is then finding a buyer, making, or making an offer, then finding a buyer on the property. So it's just going to be a little bit of a tougher lift if you don't even have buyers in these types of price points. So just be cognizant of that. Now, last thing I want to say is this: when you're calling any asset class, because this is the same thing I'm going to mention when we're diving into the other asset classes, is I don't like calling Class A locations. Like I would draw a and I'll do a polygon here, and I want to go around Brickell. I do not want to prospect Brickell. I actually want to try to get around that marker, and I'll show you. I want to try to stay away from the water. I want to stay away from all these other areas because it's super prime stuff, right? So I'm going to cut it down even more. I mean, look, this is only 97 properties, which is why I try to say do this in several different areas. But, and again, some of these are in Class A areas. I would want to try to clean this up. I'll zoom in and, really try to play around with this where I'm avoiding a lot of the super Class A market, because I found the best opportunities are in C and B class markets. I want to be in secondary and tertiary markets, right? I want to be out here, or you're going to have a little bit more opportunity to make money, especially with some of these, 24 unit, 59 unit deals. I think you're going to have a little bit more of an opportunity to make some decent money on those deals where they might be open to selling it at a fairly lucrative price, instead of something where you're calling in literally downtown Brickell, a 250 unit deal in downtown Brickell where they want $70 million or, hundreds of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars for that property. So just please keep that in mind, that I think secondary and tertiary markets is where we're going to make a lot of money. Primary markets, realistically, you're just going for listings, just in my opinion. That is the multifamily review. Again, if you have any questions in regards to multifamily, make sure you drop in the chat box. Let's get into industrial. We're going to move on to the industrial, and we're going to clear out all of those searches. Here we go. Let's do the same exact thing, but let's go into Florida. We're going to go to Florida State, start with the entire state of Florida. We're going to go down to more filters. We're going to get to to property type. We're going to go to industrial. Before I just click on a bunch of these different options and I explain to you a few different things, I also want to go to this real quick. Commercial general also does have a lot of blended stuff where they kind of just lump it in here. They're like, I don't really know what this is, so we're just going to go commercial general. Is there some warehouses in here, industrial properties? Yes. Is there some retail centers in there? Yes. Is there sometimes multifamily in there? Yeah. There's a mixed use deals in there. Like, there's a bunch of stuff that's just sitting in them commercial general bucket. Keep in mind, it might be lucrative to just prospect a commercial general list every now and again. Self-storage is part of the commercial general markets here. Super hot, but not something we're going to specifically talk about in this video. But let's talk about industrial deals. If we're playing around with this, I want to be super clear. I think it's just so funny sometimes when you actually look into what some of these properties are. It's like you have a dump site. What are you doing? Like a dump? How do you know it's a dump site? Like, REONOMY just doesn't do a great job of it. Aircraft facility, lumber yards, lumber mills, salvage yards, shipyards, all this different stuff. Storage. It's just such a weird mines and quarries. You got 1,800 properties, 1,800 mines and quarries in Florida. I don't know if all that's exactly accurate, but I will say this. I like to just go to warehouse, keep it simple. I will also add in a couple of the other major ones. So let me scroll up for you. So what I'll try to do is that I'll do like light industrial. That's a major one. Industrial condominium. You can do that. General industrial, also not so bad, because most of the time we're just looking for a warehouse. We want a clean, easy, simple warehouse deal. And again, if you don't know what to say to your warehouse sellers, make sure you go in the description down below and download my script book for free. It will support you in doing so. We do that for 5 different asset classes, everything, all the main ones, all down in the description down below, completely free. So let's just say we're going to start here. We got 74,000 industrial properties. Again, we're trying to target warehouses. If we want to try to throw in maybe some storage, we can maybe try to do that a little bit too. So whatever, we'll throw it in there. We'll do some public storage, right? We're just going to throw that in there for the warehouses. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to go down the list again. Building and lot. I don't like playing around with most of this stuff. I'm not going to do units. I'm not going to do building square footage. Even though for industrial or retail, this could be very, very lucrative. I would love for the information to be accurate. However, 99% of the time, I end up measuring the property on Google Maps. I end up then cross-referencing it with LoopNet and then cross-referencing it with CoStar as well. So most of the time, the information I find on REONOMY when it comes to square footage is wrong. I don't like playing around with year renovated. I don't think it's accurate. The lot sizes, I think actually lot sizes are fairly accurate these days. You can play around with this a little bit on the industrial or the retail side of things because sometimes they're looking for a minimum acreage amount. You can play around with this. I just have not had the greatest success with it. Hit or miss. So I don't like playing around with that if I don't have to. Let's say we go to owner. Again, we're going to do the same exact thing. We're going to include a phone number. Same thing with it, properties in their portfolio. We're going to try to say 3. I really, don't want to be prospecting people with 20 properties in their portfolio. However, you can do that at the very beginning. Again, you can play around with how many properties you can pull. So if hypothetically, you pay for extra exports like I do, you could, have a much larger lead list. But again, if you're trying to filter down a lead list under 1,000 because you only have the main version of REONOMY, then, it might just be more beneficial for you to just try to play around with this and then maybe go to 4, go to 5, go to 6, or go to 2, right? Like you're just whatever you need to do to upsize or downsize the list. This one's also fascinating. I didn't actually mention this on the multifamily side, the in-state reporting mailing address. So you can try to prospect people who are actually out-of-state owners. I actually like this a lot. They're actually fairly accurate for the most part when it comes to the owner's mailing address, in-state or out-of-state. So in-state reported mailing address. So sometimes you want to click no, and this way you'll get the people who are out-of-state owners. Could be super lucrative to try it. I've tried it. It's actually fairly accurate. Do I think that they're all much higher likelihoods of selling? No, I don't, but I do believe that it can be something that you play around with in the future. Same thing with the portfolio mass value. We're not going to play with that. We're not going to play with the assessed values. Report owners not going to play with, and mailing address we're not going to play around with. So let's dive into occupants. Same thing we talked about before. I'm not going to play around with this too much. Now in sales, not within the last 2 years. We talked about this. You can do in the last 2 years, which again, as you can see, there's actually almost 9,000 properties in the likelihood to sell. Let's say we do the last 10 years. Let's say we're going to do the last 10 years, still 20,000 properties. This is where we're going to have some fun. The price per square foot is actually something quite interesting. In the sales price, I don't like playing around with this. Like, again, I think I did that in the last one as an example. I don't actually use this often because, again, I think I'm eliminating a lot of properties because sometimes they just don't have the actual number. So what I'd like to do in industrial is on this one, I would actually prefer sometimes to pull a really interesting lead list where, watch this. It's like, imagine if you could pull a lead list where everyone bought properties at under $100 a square foot in the county you want. So let's just say we do Miami-Dade County. Now we're down to 2,785. This is saying all of these people who have bought these properties have bought the property under $100 a square foot. I mean, that's a fantastic find. Wonderful find. Good for you. Obviously, they've owned it for quite some time, but you actually, again, you can play with it. Say within the last 2 years, they bought it for under $100 a square foot. Fantastic opportunities. Let's continue to play around. And if you're trying to call larger properties, the one thing we're going to talk about is the taxes again. So again, we're going to look at debt. You can play with the maturity dates. Again, super interesting. Could be super interesting. If you want to play around with it, you can. I don't recommend it, especially for your first list. I would rather just kind of continue to go through. I don't use any of this. Let's just go to taxes. This is where we get interesting. So for tax amounts, we're going to play with $30,000 again. We're going to do the same 30 grand. The 15 is just too small. I want to do larger warehouses. We're down to 1,200. We just lost, I think, more than 60 or 70% of them don't have a larger tax amount than 30,000 because they're probably smaller warehouses. So let's go down this. Let's hit apply. It's loading. So I will do the exact same thing though. I want to get out of the downtown market. So I will go back to the draw and I will go around this and I will literally pull everything else in the secondary and tertiary markets. Built in 2022, sold in 2021. These people bought it so recently, but I mean, if you think about it, that's kind of wild they bought it. I don't know if I believe the year built always. It's just something to keep in mind. This is essentially the first lead list I would pull, right? This is a fairly good lead list. If you'd like to, you can even try to get under the 1,200 by going back to sales. Last 2 years, now you go to last 10 years. Now you're down to 796. You hit apply and you just start with this lead list. This could be a really lucrative lead list to start with. Again, if you want to try to pull not the downtown Miami or the super class, the class A markets and go to, primary markets and go to secondary and tertiary markets, I think you're going to have even more success. This would be a decent lead list for me to prospect to start. However, you're also going to see look, 11,000 square foot building. 11,000 square foot building in Medley. It's a much harder sell on a small baby 11,000 square foot building than it is in an 85,000 square foot building. So this is why everything a lot of these are marked with square footage. You can play around with it. Look, I have not had the highest success rate when it comes to square footage, but if you want to, you can go to building a lot. Let's look at the 800 here. Let's see how many go down. If I want to say I only want to do properties that are say 50,000 square feet and larger, I'm down to 161. If we go down to, let's just say 20,000, we're at 555. So, look, it's not a bad list. I just know that you're going to lose some properties that you should probably be calling by doing this. I don't think it's always accurate as well. Sometimes you get a property that says that it's 20,000 square feet or 19,000, whatever it says, and then it's actually completely different. Let's get back to the 798. Now, I would export this lead list and I would go have some fun. That's the industrial side. Now let's refresh and lastly, let's do retail. In the advanced search function, we are going to do Florida. So we go to more filters. We're going to go to property type. We're going to go into retail. Same exact thing, guys. Look how many different options there are, okay? Obviously, you're going to want to click retail stores and shopping centers. But if you look at a lot of these other ones, I just find it so fascinating. It's like automotive repair shop, automotive sales, like car dealerships. Actually fairly accurate for the most part, but just kind of interesting. Bars and taverns, nightclubs. I'm not calling that kind of stuff. Car washes, a very lucrative one. I think there's got to be more than 600 car washes in the entire state of Florida. Let's just be honest. Convenience store and gas stations could be a really lucrative one if you have some buyers for that. Department stores, to me, it's just you might as well just click department stores because in my opinion, that is part of the retail center, strip center model. Fast food restaurants, this is a lot of the time, most of the time, at least in my experience, standalone properties that are McDonald's, Burger King, you name it. Then you have laundromats, you have restaurants. These are pretty self-explanatory. Restaurants, when you're looking at restaurants, again, these are just one single tenant restaurant buildings. I don't recommend calling it. I like to just do these. I would also actually look into supermarkets, wholesale. I played around with it. Again, for me, I don't believe it as accurate as it says. I just exclude it in this list. I'm going to exclude it. So we're going to go to apply. We are at 56,000 properties. Let's start getting smaller, smart criteria. So let's go over to building and lot size. I think it's incredibly important to note. I do one asset class at a time. I'm doing just a retail list, just an industrial list, just a multifamily list. Because if you do all of them all on the same list, and then all of a sudden someone picks up the phone, you don't know what questions to ask. Oh, well, how many apartments is it? Well, it's actually a retail building. Thanks, click. And you're just going to sound like you don't know what you're doing. Building a lot. We talk about this a lot. You don't have to really play around with this too much. So let's dive into the owner. When it comes to owner, let's go to includes a phone number. We're going to play around with properties and portfolio. Let's say 3 again. We are going to do, again, you can play with the person or not person, right? It eliminates a lot of the larger companies. You can play around with this. Again, I think this is going to be a really lucrative option. I'm just not going to do it for this specific video. You can absolutely play around with that. Everything else here, you don't really need to touch. Again, you can do the in-state and just click no, and you're going to pull some out-of-state owners. You're going to do some owner-occupied properties. This is actually probably more accurate for, single tenant stuff, industrial stuff. Like, if you do restaurant, most of them are going to be owner-occupied. Let's go back to occupants. We don't really use this, just for clarity. Sales, again, not within the last 10 years. We're going to get down to 14,000. You can look at price per square foot. This would be a very lucrative option for you guys. Go down to like $100 a foot. Now within the last 10 years, you could even, look, could you imagine going down to 25 or 50 or 75 bucks in some of these markets? It'd be unbelievable. Let's say we do $100. You can play around with the sales prices here. There's a lot of different options. I don't really want to play around with this too much. I typically will play around with the price per square foot for industrial and for retail very commonly. We're down to 7,562. There's still about 1,850 properties here in the likelihood to sell. It's a good news. Let's go to debt. Reminder, you can use these. You cannot use these. I'm not going to use them for the video. You can play around with these. I think there's some decent options. Again, it's not just, it's not some magical list. We don't play around with the distress. We go to taxes, and we're going to go to tax amount. Let's do 30,000 again. We want some decent size retail properties. We're up to 1,631. We click apply. Last thing we're going to do is we're going to organize it by county. So you can go by certain counties and you can get a much clearer idea of where you want to prospect. More counties, the better. Play around with this a little bit. This would be a decent lead list for me to prospect. I know I'm not eliminating the primary markets, but you get my point. So, hey guys, if you guys enjoyed the video and you have any specific questions about how to pull lead lists, you have any questions specifically for more clarity around what I just did in this video, make sure you drop a question in the comment section down below. I actually personally just about answer every single comment myself. Also, if you've yet to do so, make sure you go down in the description down below and download our free script book so you know exactly what to say to those leads that you just exported. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up if you've enjoyed, and subscribe to the channel if you've yet to do so. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care, everybody.